3 years ago, Rachel's world was shattered by a single phone call. Her husband had died in a tragic accident, far from home. Grief swallowed her days. She mourned. She survived. Or so she thought. But one ordinary afternoon, her phone buzzed. A friend had sent her a video. And in that viral Instagram reel, among the glitter and laughter of a glamorous party in Rio, she saw him, her husband, alive, smiling, with another woman on his arm. What do you do when the person you've mourned for years is living a new life, while you're left holding the pieces of your old one? This is a story of love, lies, heartbreak, and the search for closure. It's about the pain of betrayal and the strength it takes to reclaim your story, even when the truth hurts more than the lie. Watch to the end to discover the ultimate lesson Rachel learns, and why sometimes the real justice is choosing yourself, no matter who walks away. The rain lashed against the window pane of Rachel's small, too-quiet apartment, a relentless percussion that matched the hollow drumming in her chest. 3 years. 3 years. 1 month and 17 days since the sterile voice on the international call had shattered her world. Mrs. Evans, there's been an accident in São Paulo. I'm so sorry. Your husband didn't survive. The details were a blur. A late-night collision on a rain-slicked highway, a rental car crushed against a concrete barrier, no other vehicles involved. Identification confirmed by a charred wallet and the distinctive titanium wedding band she'd saved for months to buy him. A closed casket. A void. She traced the condensation on the glass with a fingertip, mirroring the tear tracks that seemed permanently etched on her soul. David, his laugh, like sunshine breaking through clouds. The way he'd absently twirl a strand of her dark hair while reading. The impossible comfort of his embrace. Gone. Reduced to ashes in an ornate urn on her bookshelf, and a gallery of memories on her phone that felt increasingly like artifacts from another life. Grief wasn't a linear path, it was a labyrinth. Some days she functioned, teaching her third-grade class, forcing smiles at faculty meetings, grocery shopping. Other days, like this rain-soaked Saturday, the weight was crushing. The silence of the apartment pressed in, heavy and accusing. She'd sold their house after the first year. The echoes of their shared dreams in every room had become unbearable. This apartment was a refuge, sterile and manageable, yet somehow amplifying the absence. A sharp buzz shattered the oppressive quiet. Her phone lit up. A video call from Maya, her college roommate turned rock. Rachel swiped to answer, forcing brightness into her voice she didn't feel. Hey you, surviving the monsoon? Maya's face filled the screen, vibrant even through the pixelation. Her apartment, cluttered with colorful art and thriving plants, was a stark contrast to Rachel's minimalist gray. Barely. Listen, Rach, you need a distraction. I just saw the most insane reel. Remember that massive children's hospital charity gala in Rio last month? The one all the Brazilian influencers were buzzing about? Rachel managed a weak smile. Vaguely. Glitter and gowns aren't exactly top of my newsfeed these days. Yeah, well, this popped up on my Explore page. Total accident. But Rach, there's something. I need you to see this. Maya's usual exuberance was laced with an uncharacteristic hesitancy, a flicker of something like dread in her eyes. Promise me you won't freak out? Just look. A link appeared in their chat. Rachel sighed, the effort of feigning interest exhausting. She tapped it. Instagram opened, showing a professionally shot reel. Glamorous people in black tie, sparkling under chandeliers. Laughter, clinking glasses, snippets of speeches in rapid Portuguese. It was a world away. Okay, Maya, it's fancy. What am I looking for? Rachel asked, her voice flat. Keep watching. About 17 seconds in, bottom left corner, behind the woman in the gold dress. Just watch. Rachel sighed again, her finger hovering to skip ahead. Then, the scene shifted. The camera panned across a group of men near a towering ice sculpture, rich mahogany paneling, and there, in the background, slightly blurred but unmistakable, leaning against the wall, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. The phone clattered onto the hardwood floor. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that ripped through her like a physical wound. Her vision tunneled. The rain, Maya's voice calling her name distantly, everything faded into white noise. Him, the strong line of his jaw clean-shaven now, not the perpetual scruff he favored. The distinctive way his dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, even meticulously styled. The broad set of his shoulders in an impeccably tailored tuxedo, and the eyes. Even slightly out of focus, she knew those eyes. Hazel, flecked with gold, eyes that had once held promises of forever. David. The world tilted violently. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She scrambled for the phone, her hands trembling so violently she could barely pick it up. She fumbled, replaying the reel, pausing it exactly at 0:17. Zooming in, her heart hammering against her ribs like a frantic bird. It was him, not a look-alike, not a trick of the light. David, her David, alive, smiling, mingling at a gala in Rio de Janeiro, 3 years after she'd scattered his ashes on the windswept cliff he'd loved. "Rachel, Rachel, talk to me!" Maya's voice was sharp with panic through the speaker. Rachel couldn't speak. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over her, disbelief, dizzying hope, a searing, white-hot rage that burned through the numbness of grief. She stared at the frozen image. He looked good, healthy, prosperous. The titanium band was missing from his left hand. "Maya." Her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely recognizable. That's David." "Oh God, Rach, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought maybe I was crazy, seeing things. But it's uncanny." "It's him." The certainty settled, cold and heavy, extinguishing the brief, treacherous flicker of hope. This wasn't a miracle. This was something else, something monstrous. "He's alive, Maya. He's alive. And he's been gone." The following days were a blur of frantic, obsessive investigation. Grief was momentarily usurped by a furious, laser-focused need to understand. She called the Brazilian consulate again, demanding details about the accident report she'd never truly scrutinized. She scoured David's old emails, bank statements she'd boxed away in despair. She hired a discreet, expensive private investigator based in São Paulo, Paulo Silva, feeding him the Instagram reel and every scrap of information she had. The picture Silva began to paint was horrifying, a slow-motion revelation of the life David had hidden beneath the loving husband facade. The accident report Silva obtained was flimsy. A single witness statement from a truck driver who claimed to see a car lose control. Minimal debris. No definitive DNA match beyond the wallet and ring, items easily planted. The rental car was found burned out, obscuring evidence. The local police investigation had been cursory, closed quickly. Then came the financial trail. Silva uncovered debts Rachel never knew existed, massive, suffocating debts. David's architectural firm, which she'd believed was thriving, was actually teetering on the edge of bankruptcy for over a year before his death. He'd taken out huge, risky loans from sources Silva described as less than reputable. Loan sharks. Brazilian organized crime. "He was in deep, Mrs. Evans," Silva reported over a secure video call, his face grim. "Very deep. Threats were made, not just against him, but collateral." Rachel felt ice flood her veins. Collateral. Her. So, he faked his death? The words tasted like ash. It appears so. The evidence points that way. The debts vanished after his death, written off as unrecoverable, and the people he owed, they moved on. He effectively disappeared. Silva tracked down the man in the Instagram reel, Daniel Rice, a supposedly self-made businessman who'd appeared in Rio about 2.5 years ago, flush with unexplained capital. He'd started a successful boutique property development firm, specializing in high-end renovations. He lived in a luxurious Ipanema penthouse. He was photographed at charity events, art openings. He was a respected, albeit somewhat private, member of Rio's elite. Daniel Rice bore an uncanny resemblance to David Evans, because Daniel Rice was David Evans. The final piece of Silva's report shattered any remaining illusion. Daniel had been seen, discreetly, with a woman. Helena Santos, a striking Brazilian art curator. Photos, though not intimate, showed a comfortable closeness. They'd been linked for nearly 2 years. Rachel sat in her darkened living room after the call ended, the investigator's words echoing. The grief she'd carried for 3 years curdled into something dark and poisonous. It wasn't just the betrayal of their marriage vows. It was the theft of her grief. Every tear shed, every sleepless night, every milestone celebrated alone, every agonizing decision made in the shadow of his loss. It was all built on a lie. He hadn't just left her. He'd condemned her to a purgatory of sorrow while he built a sun-drenched life of luxury and lies. The titanium band wasn't just absent. It was a symbol discarded, their sacred promise turned to dust. The rage was volcanic, threatening to consume her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to break things. She wanted him to hurt the way she'd hurt. Emotional justice wasn't a courtroom verdict. It was the look on his face when the meticulously constructed facade of Daniel Rice crumbled to reveal the coward underneath. Closure wasn't about answers anymore. It was about reclaiming her power from the ruins of his deceit. She booked a flight to Rio de Janeiro. Rio assaulted Rachel's senses. The vibrant chaos, the samba rhythms pulsing from open windows, the scent of grilling meat and salt air. It was a world of overwhelming life, a cruel counterpoint to the death she'd mourned and the death he'd faked. She felt like a ghost herself, moving through the bustling streets of Ipanema in a fog of jet lag and simmering fury. Her hotel room, overlooking the famed beach, felt like a cage. Paulo Silva met her discreetly at a small, shaded cafe away from the tourist throngs. He slid an envelope across the wrought iron table. Inside were recent photos of Daniel Rice leaving his office building, entering a chic restaurant, strolling along the beachfront. Seeing him in motion, alive, vital, took her breath away. The David she remembered, yet hardened, more polished, carrying an air of success that felt obscene. "He has a standing reservation tomorrow night," Silva said quietly. 8 p.m. Sabre du Mar. Exclusive. Very private booths. Helena Santos is expected to join him later, around 9. Rachel's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Tomorrow. The confrontation she'd both craved and dreaded. Is there any chance he could be dangerous? The question felt absurd, yet the man she thought she knew was a stranger capable of unimaginable deceit. Silva shook his head. Daniel Rice has cultivated a pristine image. Violence isn't his style, disappearing was. He'll likely be shocked, panicked, desperate to contain the situation. But be cautious. Pride is a powerful motivator. The next evening, Rachel stood outside Sabre du Mar. The restaurant was as exclusive as Silva promised. Discreet entrance, soft lighting gleaming off polished wood and crystal. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back severely. She wasn't here to impress. She was here as an emissary of the past he'd tried to bury. She felt strangely calm, a cold certainty settling over the churning rage and grief. She gave the name Race to the impeccably dressed maitre d'. He scanned his list, nodded, and led her through the hushed, elegant space. Soft bossa nova played. The air smelled of expensive seafood and money. He stopped at a secluded booth tucked into an alcove, partially shielded by a potted palm. "Senor Rice will join you shortly. Can I bring you an aperitif?" Sparkling water. "Thank you," Rachel managed, her voice steady. She sat facing the entrance, her back to the wall, her heart a drum against her ribs. Minutes stretched. Each second felt amplified. She rehearsed nothing. The truth needed no script. She simply absorbed the atmosphere of his new life, the quiet luxury, the sense of entitlement it exuded. Then she saw him. He walked in, radiating the easy confidence of Daniel Rice. He was scanning the room, nodding at the maitre d', his smile smooth and practiced. He hadn't seen her yet. He moved towards the booth, checking his expensive watch, a slight frown creasing his brow, perhaps wondering about Elena's delay. He was steps away when his gaze finally swept over the booth. He stopped dead. The color drained from his face. His confident stride faltered. The smooth smile vanished, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief, then dawning, abject horror. His eyes, those familiar hazel eyes she knew so intimately, locked onto hers. They widened, filled with a terror far deeper than anything a financial threat could inspire. It was the terror of a ghost materializing, of a meticulously buried past erupting into his carefully constructed present. "Rachel?" His voice was a strangled whisper, barely audible over the soft music. He took an involuntary step back, bumping into a waiter who murmured an apology. "David," Daniel, flinched violently, as if burned. He stared, frozen, unable to process the impossible figure before him. Rachel didn't stand. She simply held his gaze, her expression unreadable, a mask of glacial calm over the seismic shift happening inside her. She saw the recognition turn to panic, saw him frantically scan the restaurant, terrified of who might be watching. His carefully curated world was teetering on the edge of collapse. "Hello, David," she said, her voice low, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. It cut through the ambient noise like shattering glass. "Or should I call you Daniel now? Fancy seeing you here. 3 years is a long time to wait for a dinner date." David remained frozen, a statue of shock and terror carved from the man she once loved. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the booth partition. The polished veneer of Daniel Reese had completely shattered, revealing the raw panic beneath. "Rachel," he choked out again, his voice trembling. What are you?" He couldn't form a coherent sentence. His eyes darted wildly, confirming Paulo Silva's prediction. His first instinct was containment, fear of exposure. "Sit down, David," Rachel commanded, the steel in her voice surprising even herself. "Before you draw more attention." He obeyed, collapsing onto the plush leather bench opposite her like his legs had given out. He stared at her, his face ashen, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's cool air. The waiter arrived with Rachel's sparkling water. David flinched again, ordering a double scotch in a voice that cracked. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, after the waiter departed. Rachel studied him. The lines around his eyes were deeper, etched by stress and, she suspected, constant vigilance. He looked older, harder. The easy warmth she remembered was replaced by a hunted tension. Yet, he was undeniably him. The reality was staggering. "You look well," she finally said, her tone laced with acid. Rio clearly agrees with you, more than pretending to be dead did, I imagine. He flinched as if struck. Rachel, God, Rachel, you don't understand. Understand? A cold laugh escaped her, devoid of humor. I understand that I buried an urn full of ashes while you were sipping cocktails overlooking Copacabana. I understand that I cried myself to sleep for 1,000 nights believing I'd lost the love of my life while you were building a new one with… Elena, is it? She saw the confirmation flash in his terrified eyes. I understand that the debts, the criminals you were entangled with, mattered more to you than me. More than us. He buried his face in his hands for a moment, his shoulders shaking. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed, filled with a desperate anguish. It wasn't about the money. Not entirely. They showed me pictures, Rachel. Pictures of you, leaving your school, walking home. They described your routine down to the minute. They said if I didn't pay or if I went to the police, they wouldn't just kill me. They'd make you suffer. Slowly. Before they killed you, too. His voice dropped to a ragged whisper. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't. Rachel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The image was horrifying. A sliver of the protective husband she knew flickered through the monstrous deception, but it was quickly extinguished by the magnitude of his choice. So your solution was to die? Her voice was low, vibrating with fury. To make me suffer instead. To leave me alone, shattered, believing the worst. Did you ever stop to think what that would do to me? Did you ever imagine the hell you were condemning me to? He looked down at the pristine tablecloth, unable to meet her gaze. I thought it was the only way to make them stop, to make them leave you alone. If I was gone, the debt died with me. And you were strong, Rachel. I knew you'd survive. You'd grieve. But you'd be safe. Alive. He said the last word as if it justified everything. Alive? Rachel echoed, the word tasting bitter. Is that what you call it? Existing in a world bleached of color, walking through days like a ghost, wondering if the pain would ever stop? You didn't give me safety, David. You gave me a life sentence of grief. You stole my present and poisoned my future. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. And while I was serving that sentence, you were playing billionaire philanthropist in Rio. You moved on. Quickly. His head snapped up, guilt warring with defensiveness. It wasn't like that. Daniel Rice, it's a mask. Every day is a performance. I live in constant fear someone will recognize me, that they will find out I'm not dead. Elena. She doesn't know anything. She thinks Daniel is a widower, that I lost my wife years ago in an illness. It's a prison, Rachel. A gilded cage. Rachel felt no pity. A cage of your own making. You chose this. You chose the lie. You chose to build a life on the grave you dug for us. She saw the waiter approaching with his scotch. She held up a hand subtly, signaling him to wait. Look at me, David. He forced himself to meet her eyes. The terror was still there, but beneath it she saw profound shame, a crushing weight of regret. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. I loved you, she said, the words stark and simple. With everything I had, I believed in you, in us. And you used that love. You weaponized my grief to save your own skin. She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. Do they know, the people you owed? Do they know Daniel Rice is David Evans? He paled further, if possible. No, God, no. That's the whole point. If they ever found out. Then they'd come for you, Rachel finished coldly. And possibly for anyone connected to you. Like Elena, like me, all over again. She saw the realization dawn in his eyes. His faked death hadn't truly protected her. It had only delayed the threat, potentially putting her in danger once more if his secret unraveled. His grand gesture was fundamentally flawed, rooted in panic, not protection. The waiter placed the scotch in front of David. He didn't touch it. He just stared at Rachel, utterly broken, the architect of his own destruction facing the wreckage. What are you going to do?" he whispered, the question hanging between them like a guillotine. Rachel didn't answer immediately. She looked at the man she had loved, the ghost who had haunted her, the coward who sat trembling before her. The volcanic rage had cooled into something harder, more resolute. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her truth, her power. "I'm going to finish my water," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "And then I'm going to leave. You don't get to know my plans, David. You forfeited that right when you chose to become a ghost." She took a slow sip, the cool liquid grounding her. "You have to live with what you've done, with the lies you've built your life upon, with the knowledge that you destroyed the one person who trusted you completely. That is your punishment. That is your cage." She saw the utter desolation in his eyes, the understanding that there would be no forgiveness, no easy resolution, that the consequences of his choices were his alone to bear forever. Emotional justice wasn't about handcuffs. It was about him truly seeing the devastation he'd wrought, knowing she saw it too, and walking away, leaving him trapped in the consequences. Rachel placed her glass down precisely. She stood up, smoothing her dress. She looked down at him, this broken stranger who wore her husband's face. "Goodbye, David. Or Daniel. Whoever you are. I hope the view from your gilded cage is worth the cost." She turned and walked away, leaving him sitting alone in the booth, untouched scotch before him, the carefully constructed edifice of Daniel Rice crumbling into dust around him. She didn't look back. The ghost was laid to rest, not in a grave, but in the ruins of his own making. Walking out of Sabor du Mar into the warm Rio night felt like stepping out of a suffocating tomb. The sounds of the city, distant traffic, laughter from a sidewalk cafe, the rhythmic crash of waves, flooded back in, vibrant and real. Rachel took a deep, shuddering breath, filling her lungs with salt air, pushing out the toxic residue of the encounter. She felt strangely weightless, yet profoundly altered. The confrontation hadn't brought the cathartic explosion she'd half expected. Instead, it had been a cold, surgical excision. Seeing him broken, terrified, and trapped by his own lies hadn't sparked pity. It had confirmed her own strength. She had faced the ghost, named the betrayal, and walked away under her own power. The rage hadn't vanished, but it was no longer a wildfire. It was banked, a source of fierce energy she could control. Back in her hotel room, the silence was different. It wasn't the oppressive silence of grief anymore. It was a space she owned, filled with the hum of the air conditioner and the distant pulse of the city. She didn't cry. She stood by the window, watching the lights of Ipanema twinkle like scattered diamonds on velvet, the view David Daniel cherished from his cage. She felt no envy, only a quiet detachment. The next day she met Paulo Silva one last time. She handed him a sealed envelope. "This contains copies of everything: the Instagram reel, your report, bank statements, the accident report discrepancies," she said, her voice steady. "I have another copy secured elsewhere. I need you to hold this, only to be opened if anything happens to me, or if I contact you with a specific instruction." Silva nodded, understanding the unspoken threat. Insurance against David's desperation or the shadowy figures from his past. "And what will you do now, Mrs. Evans?" Rachel looked out at the sun-drenched beach, the carefree people strolling below. I'm going home. But not to the apartment filled with ghosts. I'm selling it. I need space. Light. She turned back to him. What about him? Will he run again? Silva considered. Unlikely immediately. He's invested heavily here. His identity is established. Running now, with you knowing, would be even more perilous. He'll likely hunker down, hope you keep his secret, live in fear. But the threat from his past, it's diminished with time, but never truly gone. He knows that. His cage just got smaller. Rachel felt no satisfaction, only a grim acknowledgement. His punishment was ongoing, self-inflicted. She had no desire to be his jailer or his executioner. Her path was forward. Returning home was surreal. The familiar streets, her classroom, the faces of her colleagues. They looked the same, but she felt fundamentally different. The shroud of grief had lifted, replaced by a complex tapestry of anger, sorrow, betrayal, and a burgeoning, hard-won sense of liberation. She wasn't over it. She doubted she ever would be, but she was no longer drowning in it. She listed the apartment. Packing was an act of exorcism. She didn't burn his things in anger. She donated them methodically, releasing the physical anchors to the past. The urn was the hardest. She took it back to the wind-swept cliff he'd loved. She didn't scatter the ashes this time. She opened the urn and let the wind take them, mingling them with the sea spray. She wasn't burying David. She was releasing the illusion of him. The man she married had died 3 years ago, consumed by fear and deceit. The ashes were just dust. Goodbye, David, she whispered to the wind, her voice clear. The man I loved. The man I lost long before the accident. She found a small house. Not an apartment, a house, with a garden. Sunlight streamed through large windows. It needed work, but it felt like a canvas, a space to build something entirely her own. She painted walls in warm, vibrant colors David would have hated. She bought furniture that was just hers. She started gardening, digging her hands into the earth, nurturing life. The physical labor was grounding, therapeutic. She didn't hide her story, but she didn't shout it either. She told Maya the truth. She told her principal, simply stating she'd discovered her husband had faked his death, that she was dealing with the legal and emotional fallout, and requested understanding. The shock and support were overwhelming. People rallied around her, not with pity, but with fierce protectiveness and admiration for her strength. Therapy became essential. Not to get over it, but to process the complex layers of trauma, the grief for the marriage she thought she had, the betrayal, the anger, the violation of her trust and her grief. She learned to separate the David she loved and mourned from the coward who had betrayed her. She learned that forgiveness wasn't required for healing. Releasing the burden of his choices was. One evening, months later, sitting in her new garden watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Rachel opened her laptop. She navigated to Instagram. She hadn't blocked Daniel Rice. She hadn't looked either. Tonight, she did. His profile was still there. Daniel Rice, property developer, philanthropist. The photos were the same: galas, construction sites, art openings. Elena Santos featured prominently, her smile bright. But Rachel saw it now, the subtle tension around David's eyes, the forced set of his smile, the hollowness behind the carefully curated life. He was living his consequence. She felt no pull, no residual longing, only a detached acknowledgement. She hovered over the block button, not out of anger, but out of finality. She didn't need updates on his prison. She didn't need him in her digital space, a ghost on a screen. Her healing wasn't about him anymore. She clicked, block. Then she opened a new tab. She typed, "Creative writing workshops near me." An old dream, shelved during her marriage, then buried by grief. It felt like planting a seed in the fertile ground of her reclaimed self. The journey wasn't over. Some days the anger flared. Some nights, the loneliness echoed. The betrayal was a scar, deep and permanent. But it was no longer a wound that defined her. She had stared into the abyss of deceit and walked back into the light, carrying the lessons, the strength forged in fire, and the hard-won understanding that her worth was never tied to his lies or his absence. Rachel Evans had buried her husband twice, once in sorrow, once in truth. Now, finally, she was building a life, not in the shadow of his death or his deception, but in the bright, sometimes challenging sunlight of her own resilience. She had found closure not in his downfall, but in her own rise from the ashes. The story of David and Rachel was over. The story of Rachel was just beginning. And this time, she was writing it herself. The emotional justice was her peace. The powerful lesson was her own indomitable spirit.